Robert Kennedy appealed to young and old, black and white, student and worker, trying to end the violence that began with the murder of his brother.
Give me a place to stand, said Archimedes, and I will move the world. These men move the world, and so can we all. Few will have the greatness to bend history, but each of us can work to change a small portion of the events, and in the total, all of these acts will be written in the history of this generation.
I want to say to all of you how much my wife and I appreciate the opportunity to meet you. Unfortunately, as we walked through the line, we didn't have an opportunity to shake hands with everybody. So, louder. As the candidate, you got it as loud as I can go.
Thousands of Peace Corps volunteers are making a difference in the isolated villages and the city slums of dozens of countries. Thousands of unknown men and women in Europe resisted the occupation of the Nazis, and many died, but all added to the ultimate strength and freedom of their country.
Cannot continue to deny and postpone the demands of our own people while spending billions in the name of freedom elsewhere around the globe. No nation can exert greater influence or power in the world than it can exercise over the streets of its own capital. And I think we have to recognize that as well.
The civil rights movement of the early 1960s was that also. But now, with the advent, for instance, of black power and so many of those who were involved in civil rights movements, one race turns against another. One group, part of the population turns against another part of the population. Then a person, you don't know where you belong in all of it, and what you can do, and what role you can play. And it seems to me that that has a tremendous effect in our country.
Announcing today my candidacy for the presidency of the United States. I do not run for the presidency merely to oppose any man, but to propose new policies. My decision reflects no personal animosity or disrespect toward President Johnson. The issue is not personal. It is our profound differences over where we are heading and what we want to accomplish.
Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance.
So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Some very sad news for all of you, and that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis. Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it's perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in. For those of you who are black, considering the evidence evidently is that there were white people who were responsible, you can be filled with bitterness and with hatred and a desire for revenge. For those of you who are black and are tempted to be filled with hatred and mistrust of the injustice of such an act against all white people, I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling I had a member of my family killed, but he was killed by a white man. But we have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to get beyond or go beyond these rather difficult times. My favorite poem, my favorite poet was Aeschylus. He once wrote, "Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there.
On this day, June 4th, 1968, he has won the California primary, finishes his victory speech, and moves through the happy crowd to this doorway. Then enters the door to the kitchen passageway, where a Palestinian fanatic waits with a gun.
Your Eminences, Your Excellencies, Mr. President, on behalf of Mrs. Kennedy, her children, the parents and sisters of Robert Kennedy, I want to express what we feel to those who mourn with us today in this cathedral and around the world. We loved him as a brother and as a father and as a son. From his parents and from his older brothers and sisters, Joe and Kathleen and Jack, he received an inspiration which he passed on to all of us. He gave us strength in time of trouble, wisdom in time of uncertainty, and sharing in time of happiness. He will always be by our side. My brother need not be idealized or enlarged in death beyond what he was in life, to be remembered simply as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to stop it. Those of us who loved him and who take him to his rest today pray that what he was to us, what he wished for others, will someday come to pass for all the world. As he said many times in many parts of this nation, to those he touched and who sought to touch him, some men see things as they are and say why. I dream things that never were and say why not.